Here he is, friends. He got his suit back just in time. And no matter what happens in his life, he gets absolutely no respect.
Johnny Carson was America's king of late-night television, the smooth, sharp-witted host who made millions laugh for 30 years. But behind the laughter, he saw more than jokes and celebrity charm. However, before he passed away, Carson reportedly shared stories about some famous stars who were hiding their true identity as gay. So what were the secrets they carried? And how did Carson decide it was time to tell theirs? In this video, we'll explore 9 guests who had appeared on Carson's television show who lived their lives secretly as gay. Number 9. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson was the dream man for millions of American women in the 1950s and 1960s. Tall, charming, and effortlessly handsome, he became one of Hollywood's biggest romantic stars, often paired with Doris Day in comedies that made him the perfect image of the ideal straight man. But behind that image was a carefully hidden truth. A former Tonight Show writer said, "The irony was huge." Johnny Carson sat night after night talking with the man every woman in America adored, knowing his public image was built on a lie. Hudson appeared on The Tonight Show many times, delighting audiences with stories of his glamorous life. But behind the scenes, both he and Carson felt great tension. An NBC employee who worked on the show later revealed that Carson knew Hudson was gay. It wasn't a secret in Hollywood, but Carson also knew that if the truth came out, Hudson's career would be destroyed. Each interview became a careful dance to avoid the subject. Hudson carried a heavier burden than most. His fame depended on women believing in his romantic image. A Hollywood historian explained that this wasn't just about privacy. Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, had built his entire image and even arranged a fake marriage to his secretary, Phyllis Gates, to silence rumors. The marriage lasted only 3 years, from 1955 to 1958, but it achieved its goal. According to Carson's friends, he found these lavender marriages deeply troubling. Johnny called it organized deception, one said. He wasn't judging anyone's sexuality. He just hated how the system forced people to live a lie. The illusion finally collapsed in 1985 when Hudson died from AIDS-related complications, becoming one of the first major stars to do so. Carson was deeply moved, realizing how trapped Hudson had been in a system that valued image over truth. In his later reflections, Carson saw Hollywood as a place where fame often demanded secrecy. Stars lived behind masks, terrified of exposure. Now, talking of Rock Hudson, this next one will shock you even more. Let's find out. Number 8. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy's relationship is often remembered as one of Hollywood's greatest love stories. A 26-year romance that inspired books, documentaries, and films. But according to people who knew Johnny Carson's private thoughts, he believed the truth behind their story was far more complicated than the public ever realized. A former Tonight Show staff member said Carson had interviewed Hepburn many times and deeply admired her. Yet he was amazed by how completely the public had accepted a version of her relationship with Tracy that, in his view, mixed fact with fiction. Later in life, Carson told close friends that he believed Hepburn and Tracy's partnership was more of a practical arrangement than a passionate romance. It allowed both to protect their careers and avoid questions about their private lives. For Tracy, a Catholic who refused to divorce his wife, it offered a respectable reason for living apart from her without scandal. For Hepburn, it explained why such a desirable woman never married, while giving her freedom to live as she wished. Carson had noticed that Hepburn's closest companions were often women. She lived for many years with Laura Harding and later shared a long relationship with Phyllis Wilborn, whom some biographers said she affectionately called her wife. To Carson, it was remarkable how Hollywood's publicity machine turned what was largely a deep friendship and professional alliance into the greatest love story of the century. Tracy's alcoholism and long absences gave Hepburn independence, while her care for him during his final illness helped seal their public image as devoted lovers. The story protected both of them, even as it hid the more complex truths of their lives. Carson admired how Hepburn protected her privacy. She avoided fake studio romances and instead built a quiet life in Connecticut and New York, far from Hollywood gossip. He also respected her bold, masculine style, trousers, flat shoes, and little makeup, which he saw as her quiet way of being true to herself in a time when women were expected to conform. Moving away from Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, an even more surprising story lies ahead. Let's take a look. Number 7. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando changed movie acting forever with his powerful and realistic performances. His role as Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire, followed by his work in On the Waterfront and The Godfather, made him one of the most influential actors in film history. But according to people who knew Johnny Carson's private thoughts, the talk show host was deeply interested in the contrast between Brando's on-screen honesty and the secrecy surrounding his personal life. A former Tonight Show producer said that Carson interviewed Brando several times and found him unusually difficult. Brando was praised for his truthfulness in acting, yet he carefully hid parts of his real life, especially his sexuality. Publicly, he appeared as a charming womanizer, often seen with famous actresses and married several times, fathering many children. But Carson, like many in Hollywood, knew that Brando's private life was far more complex. One writer close to Carson said, "Johnny often pointed out the irony. Brando was seen as the man who brought truth to acting, yet he wasn't fully honest about himself." In his later years, Brando became more open, admitting in interviews that he had romantic relationships with men. However, during his peak in the 1950s and 1960s, this part of his life stayed hidden, with studios promoting his image as a strong, straight leading man. A friend of Carson said the host admired how Brando managed to protect himself while still challenging Hollywood norms. He built a masculine public image strong enough to avoid suspicion, but also quietly stretched the limits of what could be accepted. Rumors about Brando's relationships with other male stars, especially James Dean, spread through Hollywood for years. Carson was fascinated by how both men, seen as symbols of American masculinity, were rumored to have lived lives that defied that very image. To Carson, it showed how different Hollywood's ideals were from the truth, a contrast he found both troubling and deeply revealing. Number 6. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power's striking looks made him one of 20th Century Fox's biggest stars during the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. With his sharp features and romantic charm, he became famous for adventurous roles in movies like The Mark of Zorro and Blood and Sand, and also proved his serious acting talent in Witness for the Prosecution. A former Tonight Show staff member said Johnny Carson never met Power, who died in 1958 before Johnny became host. But he often heard stories about him from Hollywood veterans. These stories painted a picture of a man living a double life. Carson was fascinated by how Power, whose fame was built on his appeal to women, reportedly maintained secret relationships with men while his studio arranged public dates with actresses to protect his image. Power's marriages to French actress Annabella, Mexican actress Linda Christian, and later Debbie Ann Menardos helped sustain his reputation as a devoted husband and ladies' man. His 7-year marriage to Annabella, in particular, gave the illusion of normality that his career required. Carson often reflected on the emotional weight such lives carried. These relationships were not always fake. Many involved genuine feelings and even children. But they also revealed how limited the choices were for stars who didn't fit society's expectations. Carson once noted the irony of Power's situation. His incredible beauty opened doors to fame, but also trapped him. Fans became so obsessed with his romantic image that he couldn't freely express his true self. As one producer put it, the more perfect the face, the less freedom the person has. Power's beauty made him both privileged and imprisoned. His sudden death at age 44 from a heart attack ended a brilliant career and erased any chance of him seeing the social changes that later allowed stars to live more openly. As astonishing as this revelation could be, this next one is even more breathtaking. Let's take a closer look. Number 5. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. Charles Laughton created unforgettable roles in classic films such as The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Mutiny on the Bounty, and Witness for the Prosecution. His wife, Elsa Lanchester, also became famous for her role as the Bride of Frankenstein and appeared in many films during her long career. Their marriage, which lasted from 1929 until Laughton's death in 1962, seemed to be one of Hollywood's strongest and most lasting unions. According to a former Tonight Show writer familiar with Johnny Carson's private talks, Carson was especially fascinated by the Laughton-Lanchester marriage. Hollywood insiders often whispered that both were gay, and that their marriage was a kind of mutual protection, a way to appear conventional while privately living as they wished. Several of Carson's trusted sources confirmed that Laughton was homosexual and Lanchester was lesbian, making their marriage one of Hollywood's most carefully constructed covers. A producer recalled that Carson interviewed Lanchester several times after Laughton's death and admired how she honored their marriage in public while skillfully avoiding topics that could reveal its true nature. What made their partnership remarkable was its endurance. Unlike many studio-arranged unions that fell apart, Laughton and Lanchester's marriage lasted more than 3 decades. Over time, they developed a deep friendship and creative partnership, even without romantic or sexual involvement. A friend who discussed old Hollywood with Carson said he saw their relationship as a smart solution to an impossible problem, when being gay could destroy your career. Their marriage gave both security and respectability while letting them pursue their own lives privately. In her 1983 autobiography, Elsa Lanchester herself, she briefly mentioned that Laughton was not an easy husband, but avoided any talk about his sexuality. This silence reflected how stars of their generation managed such sensitive issues while keeping up appearances. Carson viewed their union as a graceful and clever way for 2 talented people to survive in a world that forced them to hide who they really were. Number 4. James Dean. James Dean starred in only 3 major films before his death in a car crash at age 24. Yet his performances in East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant turned him into a lasting symbol of youthful rebellion. His quiet intensity and restless energy captured the feelings of a generation searching for truth in a world that often demanded conformity. According to people who knew Johnny Carson, the late-night host was deeply unsettled by what he heard about Dean's rise to fame. Though Carson never met or interviewed him, since Dean died before Carson took over The Tonight Show, he often heard stories from insiders in Hollywood. These stories claim that Dean had formed close relationships with powerful men to help his career. The rumors, widely whispered both during and after his short life, suggested that Dean might have been bisexual and had used these relationships to survive Hollywood's fierce competition. A writer who worked with Carson said, Johnny often reflected on how Dean's public image as a genuine rebel, true to himself, clashed with these darker accounts of his ambition. Carson saw it as a sign of how corrupt Hollywood could be, forcing even its icons of independence to make painful compromises just to succeed. One of the most persistent rumors involved Dean's relationship with director Rogers Brackett, who reportedly played a major role in helping the young actor find his footing in the industry. Still, Carson was careful not to judge Dean. He saw the situation as proof of how unfair the system was, how it pushed talented people into difficult moral choices. What fascinated Carson most was how Dean's early death changed everything. Because he died young, he was spared the exposure and public scrutiny that might have damaged his image. His death froze him in time, forever young, mysterious, and untouchable. For Carson, Dean's story became the perfect example of how Hollywood could turn even painful truths into legend, reshaping reality to keep its stars and prophets alive forever. And just when you think Dean's identity was shocking, Burr's story proves even more heartbreaking. Let's find out. Number 3. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr became one of television's most admired stars through his unforgettable roles as the sharp defense lawyer Perry Mason and later as the wheelchair-bound detective Robert Ironside. With his deep voice and commanding presence, he became a familiar face to millions of viewers who watched him every week for many years. According to a former Tonight Show staff member, Johnny Carson interviewed Burr several times and was fascinated by how much of the actor's life story was fiction. Burr had created an elaborate false biography to hide his homosexuality, and Carson had to go along with the stories on live television. People close to Carson later said he was shocked by how detailed Burr's inventions were. The actor claimed he had been married 3 times and that his first wife and son were killed in a plane crash during World War II. He also spoke about serving in the military and being wounded in combat, none of which was true. One Tonight Show producer recalled Carson saying it felt like interviewing a character rather than a real person. Johnny found it deeply sad that Burr had to create not only a fake heterosexual identity but also a tragic past meant to win sympathy and avoid questions about his private life. In truth, Burr spent the last 35 years of his life with his partner Robert Benavides, whom he met on the set of Perry Mason in 1960. Together, they built a successful orchid business and vineyard, living quietly as partners while pretending publicly to be only business associates. A friend of Carson said he was struck by how painful it must have been for Burr to live such a double life. The man who played a character devoted to uncovering truth had to hide behind lies because of the prejudice of mid-20th century America. Carson saw this as a powerful example of the unfair choices gay actors faced at the time. After Burr's death in 1993, Benavides inherited his estate and later spoke more openly about their life together. And if Burr's story wasn't surprising enough, wait until you find out this next one. Number 2. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich brought a sense of European style and mystery to Hollywood that deeply fascinated American audiences. From her breakout role in The Blue Angel to her famous collaborations with director Joseph von Sternberg, she created a daring image of glamour that few American-born stars ever attempted. A former Tonight Show producer said Johnny Carson interviewed Dietrich several times and truly admired her honesty. He was amazed that she had been so open about her sexuality at a time when such truth could have ruined an American star's career. Unlike many of her Hollywood peers, Dietrich didn't try hard to hide her bisexuality. She was married to Rudolf Sieber from 1923 until his death in 1976. Yet she had well-known relationships with both men and women, including actresses and female writers. A writer who worked closely with Carson explained, "What impressed Johnny most was her refusal to feel ashamed. Her European background and sexual confidence gave her space to live more freely than most American stars could." Dietrich's androgynous fashion, her love of men's tailored suits, her smoky voice, and her strong, confident presence added a touch of gender fluidity to her screen image. What could have been scandalous instead became part of her unique charm. She turned what others might see as weakness into strength, making her mystery and independence central to her appeal. A cultural historian who often talked about Hollywood with Carson said he saw Dietrich as someone who learned to hide in plain sight. She didn't deny who she was, she made it fashionable. Her open marriage allowed both her and Sieber to live as they wished. He even lived with another woman for many years while remaining friendly with Dietrich. Carson found it fascinating that Hollywood treated European stars differently from Americans. Dietrich could behave in ways that would have destroyed another actress's career. Number 1. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott. Cary Grant was the very picture of charm and sophistication for generations of movie lovers. With his perfect style, smooth mix of British class and American ease, and romantic roles opposite some of Hollywood's most glamorous women, he became the ultimate ladies' man, a symbol that still lives on today. But according to a former NBC employee who knew Johnny Carson well, the talk show host saw something deeper behind Grant's polished image. Carson deeply admired Grant's talent, but was fascinated by the gap between the man the world saw and the man he really was. Here was the very definition of suave, living a life that few people ever suspected, the insider explained. What caught Carson's attention most was Grant's long relationship with fellow actor Randolph Scott, a handsome cowboy star best known for westerns. For more than 10 years, the two shared a beach house in Santa Monica, that Hollywood insiders jokingly called Bachelor Hall. A writer who worked with Carson once revealed that during the height of both men's fame, Johnny interviewed Grant on The Tonight Show and found it surreal to discuss his 5 marriages, knowing that the most meaningful relationship in Grant's life had been with another man. Even more curious was how public the Grant-Scott partnership really was. They appeared together in fan magazines, cooking, exercising, and relaxing at home. Photographs that today would clearly look like those of a couple. Yet at the time, studios simply described them as bachelor roommates sharing expenses. Grant went on to marry 5 times, relationships that many historians now view as lavender marriages, designed to protect a star's public image in an era when being openly gay could end a career. Carson, who had spent decades interviewing stars, reportedly felt deep sympathy for Grant. He saw how the actor had built an entire persona, Cary Grant, just to survive in a world that demanded perfection but punished honesty. In his later years, Carson privately admitted he regretted being part of the Hollywood machine that kept up these illusions. So, which of these guests did you find the most surprising? Let us know your opinion in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.